I was never looking at her. 5 words. That's all it took to shatter 30 years of carefully constructed lies at a billionaire's family dinner table. When Vivian Hale made her usual joke about being the ugly sister, she expected polite laughter. What she got instead was a stranger's quiet declaration that turned her entire world inside out. But this wasn't a love story, not yet. This was about money, power, and a father who had spent years building a trap disguised as inheritance. Stay with me until the end of this story. Hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this goes. The Mercedes hit a patch of black ice half a mile from the estate, and Vivian Hale's hands tightened on the wheel before her brain could catch up. The car fishtailed once, twice, then straightened. She exhaled slowly, fingers aching from the grip. Dramatic entrance avoided, she muttered to the empty car. Through the windshield, her family's lake house emerged from the snow like something out of a catalog, all stone and timber and floor-to-ceiling windows reflecting the frozen lake beyond. 12,000 square feet of architectural perfection that had never once felt like home. Vivian parked next to her sister's Range Rover, which was, of course, already there. Isabel was always early, always prepared, always better at playing the daughter their father actually wanted. The front door opened before Vivian could knock, and there was Margaret, the housekeeper who'd been with the family since Vivian was 7. Miss Vivian. Margaret's smile was genuine, at least. Your father's in the study, your mother's upstairs, and Miss Isabel is already making herself useful in the kitchen? Vivian guessed. Margaret's expression shifted into something diplomatic. She brought homemade cookies. Of course she did. Vivian stepped inside and the warmth hit her like a wall. The house smelled like pine and cinnamon and wood smoke. All the scents that were supposed to mean family and belonging and home. Instead, they just made her shoulders tense. She left her bags in the foyer and headed toward the study. Better to get the first encounter over with. Her father was behind his desk, reading glasses perched on his nose, reviewing what looked like contracts. He glanced up when she appeared in the doorway. Vivian, you're late. Traffic, she lied. On Christmas weekend? She didn't answer. He wouldn't believe her anyway. Richard Hale set down his pen with the precise movements of a man who had never done anything carelessly in his life. He was 63, silver-haired, impeccably dressed, even at the lake house. Everything about him communicated control. We're doing dinner at 7, he said. Isabel's already started on the appetizers. I'll change first. Don't take too long. We have a guest tonight. That made her pause. What kind of guest? Adrian Cross. I hired him to consult on the estate management. He's bringing his daughter. She's 6, I think. Your mother thought it would be nice to include them for the holiday. Vivian knew what that meant. Her mother collected people the way some women collected art, carefully, strategically, always with an eye toward how they'd look in the collection. A single father with a young daughter? That was heartwarming. That played well. How generous of her, Vivian said flatly. Her father's eyes narrowed slightly. Try to be pleasant tonight. I know it's difficult for you, but make an effort. The barb landed exactly where he'd aimed it. Vivian felt it lodge somewhere behind her sternum, but she kept her expression neutral. 30 years of practice had made her good at that. I'll do my best, she said, and left before he could say anything else. Her room was exactly as she'd left it at Thanksgiving, guest-ready, impersonal, stripped of anything that might indicate someone had actually grown up there. Her mother had redecorated it 5 years ago, turning it into something that looked like a hotel suite designed by someone who'd read about Scandinavian minimalism in a magazine. Vivian sat on the edge of the bed and pulled out her phone. 3 texts from her assistant about the Jakarta deal. 2 emails from her CFO about Q4 projections. 1 message from her best friend Maya asking if she'd survived arrival yet. Barely, Vivian typed back. Guest consultant at dinner tonight. This should be fun. Maya's response came immediately. Rich people collecting more rich people for their collection? Single dad with a kid. Mom's humanitarian streak is showing. Ugh. Want me to call with a fake emergency? Vivian smiled despite herself. Tempting. But I can handle 1 dinner. She changed into something her mother would find acceptable. A cashmere sweater in deep burgundy, tailored black pants, small diamond earrings that had been a gift from her grandmother. The armor of inherited wealth, perfectly assembled. When she came downstairs, she could hear voices from the kitchen. Isabel's laugh, bright and warm. Her mother's murmur of approval, and another voice, male, unfamiliar. Really didn't have to go to all this trouble? Nonsense, her mother was saying. It's Christmas, and Emma must be so excited about the cookies. Vivian paused in the hallway, giving herself 5 seconds to steel her expression into something pleasant and neutral. Then she walked into the kitchen. Isabel was at the island, arranging cookies on a plate with the kind of casual elegance that made everything look effortless. Her mother stood by the stove, stirring something that smelled like mulled wine. And near the window, crouched down to be at eye level with a small girl in a bright red sweater, was a man Vivian had never seen before. He was tall. She could tell even with him kneeling, with dark hair starting to go gray at the temples, and the kind of face that looked like it had earned every line around the eyes. He wore jeans and a flannel shirt under a canvas jacket, and there was something about the way he moved that suggested comfort in his own skin. The little girl was showing him something on her tablet, chattering away about reindeer. And this one is Rudolph, obviously, because of the nose, but I think Blitzen is probably the fastest because his name sounds like lightning. That's solid logic, the man said seriously. Can't argue with linguistics. Vivian, her mother spotted her first. Come meet Adrian and Emma. The man, Adrian, stood, and the little girl looked up. She had his eyes, dark and curious. Adrian Cross, he said, extending a hand. Thanks for having us. His handshake was firm, brief, professional. Vivian found herself cataloging details automatically. Calluses on his palms, sleeves rolled to his elbows, work boots that had actually seen work. Vivian Hale, she said. Welcome. Emma tugged on her father's sleeve. Is she the one who builds buildings? Adrian glanced down. That's right. That's so cool, Emma said, with complete sincerity. I want to build a castle when I grow up. That's a good goal, Vivian said, and meant it. Isabel appeared at her elbow with a glass of wine. Here, you look like you need this. That obvious? Only to me. Isabel's smile was sympathetic. Dad's in rare form tonight. When isn't he? They moved into the dining room together, a procession of expensive stemware and inherited silver. Vivian ended up seated across from Adrian, with Emma next to him in a booster seat that Margaret had produced from some closet. Her father took his position at the head of the table like it was a throne. Thank you all for being here, Richard said, lifting his glass. To family and to new friends. Vivian drank and tried not to think about how many of these dinners she'd endured over the years. How many times she'd sat in this exact chair, wearing this exact expression, pretending everything was fine. The first course was some kind of soup, butternut squash probably, knowing her mother's preferences. Conversation flowed around her like water around a stone. Isabel was telling some story about a charity gala. Her mother was asking Adrian polite questions about his work. Emma was focused on her soup with the intense concentration of a child trying to use a spoon properly. And of course, Vivian's been so busy with her projects, we barely see her anymore, her mother was saying. Vivian looked up. The Jakarta development is in a critical phase. Still, her mother said with a delicate sigh, it would be nice if you could make time for family more often. I'm here now. Yes, we're grateful. The words were pleasant enough, but Vivian heard the subtext loud and clear. You're here out of obligation, not love, and we all know it. What kind of development? Adrian asked. Vivian blinked, surprised he was addressing her directly. Mixed use. Residential towers with retail and green space. High density but sustainable. Sounds ambitious. It is. She's always been ambitious, her father said. There was something in his tone that made the word sound like a criticism. Even as a child. Always pushing, always trying to prove something. Vivian's jaw tightened. I wasn't aware ambition was a character flaw. It's not, when it's tempered with wisdom. Her father smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. That comes with time. Isabel jumped in smoothly. Speaking of time, did you see the article in the Times about sustainable architecture? They featured that project in Copenhagen, the one with the living walls. Bless her for the redirect. Vivian let the conversation shift, retreating back into her carefully constructed neutrality. Emma was having trouble cutting her chicken. Adrian noticed and quietly switched their plates, giving her his pre-cut pieces without making a big deal of it. The gesture was so automatic, so unconsciously kind, that Vivian found herself watching him differently. "So, Adrian," her mother said, "Vivian's father mentioned you're a widower?" Vivian winced internally. Her mother had the subtlety of a hammer when she was gathering information. Adrian's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes. "Yes, Emma's mother passed 3 years ago." "I'm so sorry. That must be incredibly difficult." "We manage." He looked at Emma, who was now focused on her green beans. "We're doing okay, aren't we, Em?" "Daddy makes really good pancakes," Emma announced, "even though they're sometimes weird shapes." "They're called abstract," Adrian said solemnly. "Very artistic." Emma giggled. Vivian felt something unexpected, a pull of warmth toward this man she'd just met, this stranger who made pancakes for his daughter and didn't flinch when her mother asked invasive questions. Dessert was some elaborate thing involving chocolate and raspberries. Vivian ate mechanically, aware of the way Isabel kept glancing at her with concern. Then, inevitably, the conversation turned. "You know," her mother said, dabbing her mouth with her napkin, "I was looking at the photos from the gala last month. Isabel, you looked absolutely stunning in that gown." "Thank you, Mom." "Didn't she?" Her mother turned to Adrian. "My daughters are both beautiful, of course, but Isabel has always had that classic elegance. She photographs so well." Vivian felt the familiar twist in her chest. Here it came. "Not that Vivian isn't attractive," her mother continued, as if that made it better. "She's just more practical in her appearance, which suits her personality." Isabel looked mortified. "Mom!" But Vivian was already retreating behind her usual defense mechanism, humor with an edge of self-deprecation. If she said it first, it hurt less when they agreed. "It's fine," Vivian said lightly. "We all know Isabel got the beauty genes. I got the spreadsheet genes instead. Fair trade." She expected the usual response, polite laughter, maybe a weak protest from Isabel, then a subject change. Instead, Adrian Cross set down his fork and spoke. "I was never looking at her." The words fell into the conversation like stones into still water. Vivian's mother blinked. "I'm sorry?" Adrian's gaze was steady, direct, aimed at Vivian. "When I walked in tonight, I wasn't looking at your other daughter. I was looking at Vivian." The silence that followed was deafening. Vivian felt her face flush hot, then cold. Her heart was doing something strange in her chest, racing and stopping at the same time. "Well," her mother said after a pause that felt like it lasted a year. That's very kind of you to say." "I'm not being kind," Adrian said calmly. "I'm being accurate." Her father cleared his throat. "Perhaps we should move to the sitting room for coffee." Everyone stood, moving with the awkward efficiency of people trying to pretend something hadn't just happened. Vivian's hands were shaking as she picked up her water glass. She didn't trust herself to look at Adrian or Isabel or anyone else. Emma was yawning, leaning against her father's side. "I should probably get her back to the guest house," Adrian said. "It's past her bedtime." "Of course," Vivian's mother said, overly bright. "Margaret can show you the way." "I know the way. Thank you for dinner. It was lovely." He lifted Emma into his arms, and she settled against his shoulder like she belonged there. At the door he paused and looked back. His eyes found Vivian's across the room. "Good night," he said quietly. Then he was gone. Vivian stood frozen while her family dispersed, her mother to the kitchen to oversee cleanup, her father to his study, Isabel hovering nearby with concern written all over her face. "Viv, I'm fine." I said I'm fine. But she wasn't fine. She was the opposite of fine. She was standing in her family's perfect lake house, feeling like someone had just reached into her chest and rearranged her organs. I was never looking at her. 5 words. 5 words that shouldn't matter. 5 words that somehow changed everything. Vivian excused herself and went upstairs, closing her bedroom door with careful precision. Then she sat on the edge of the hotel bed and stared at the wall. Her phone buzzed. Maya. How bad was dinner? Vivian started typing, then deleted it. Started again. Deleted again. How did you explain that a stranger had just spoken a truth you'd never let yourself believe? How did you put into words the feeling of being seen for the first time in 30 years? Complicated, she finally typed back. Tell you later. She changed into pajamas and washed her face, going through all the familiar motions while her brain tried to process what had happened. It didn't mean anything. It was just a polite statement. He was probably trying to diffuse an awkward situation. He felt sorry for her. Except his voice hadn't sounded like pity. Vivian turned off the light and lay in the dark, listening to the old house settle around her. Outside, snow was still falling, covering the world in white. Tomorrow would be easier. Tomorrow she'd have her armor back in place. But tonight, in the darkness, she let herself feel it, that small, dangerous spark of something she'd stopped allowing herself years ago. Hope. Vivian woke at 5:30, which was normal. Her body didn't believe in sleeping in, even on vacation. She dressed quietly, leggings, an oversized sweater, thick socks, and made her way downstairs. The house was silent except for the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway. In the kitchen, she started coffee and stood at the window watching the lake while the machine gurgled to life. The world outside was blue-gray and hushed, that particular quality of light that came just before dawn in winter. She needed to work. Work was safe. Work was controllable. Vivian carried her coffee to the library, a wood-paneled room that smelled like old books and leather. Her father's desk sat in front of the window, but there was a smaller table in the corner that she'd always preferred. She pulled out her laptop and opened the file she'd been avoiding for weeks, the one labeled Estate Restructuring Agreement. Her father had presented it to her in October, wrapped in language about legacy planning and family unity. She'd signed it because refusing would have meant a fight she didn't have energy for, but something about it had been bothering her ever since. Vivian pulled up the document and started reading properly, the way she should have done before putting her signature on it. She was 3 pages in when she heard footsteps in the hallway. "Coffee's in the kitchen," she said without looking up, assuming it was Margaret. "Already found it, thanks." Vivian's head snapped up. Adrian Cross stood in the doorway, holding a mug and looking annoyingly awake for someone who should still be asleep. "Sorry," he said. "Didn't mean to startle you. I'm an early riser." "Apparently. Emma's still asleep. I figured I'd get some work done before she wakes up and demands pancakes." He nodded toward her laptop. "Looks like you had the same idea." Vivian closed the file instinctively. "Just catching up on some things." "The estate documents?" She stiffened. "How did you—" "Your father mentioned he wanted me to look at the long-term management structure. I've been reviewing the property holdings and trust arrangements." He took a sip of coffee. "Mind if I sit? Or I can leave you alone if you'd prefer." She should send him away. She should maintain professional distance and not engage with someone who'd said those 5 devastating words at dinner. "Sit," she heard herself say. He pulled out a chair across from her, settling in with the ease of someone comfortable with silence. They worked without speaking for nearly 20 minutes. Vivian tried to focus on the screen in front of her, but she kept getting distracted by the sound of him typing, the occasional rustle of paper. Finally, she couldn't take it anymore. "Why did you say that last night?" Adrian looked up. "Say what?" "That you weren't looking at Isabel." "Because I wasn't." "That's not an answer." He set down his pen and regarded her with that same steady gaze from dinner. "Your mother was comparing you to your sister. You deflected with a self-deprecating joke. I corrected the record. You made everyone uncomfortable." "Good." Vivian blinked. "Good?" "They should be uncomfortable. That kind of comparison is cruel. Casual cruelty is worse than the obvious kind because people convince themselves it doesn't count." Something in her chest tightened. "You don't know my family." "I know enough." "From one dinner?" "From the way you held yourself through that dinner, like you were bracing for impact." He paused. "And from the way no one seemed surprised by your mother's comment, that wasn't a one-time thing." Vivian looked away, back to her laptop screen. The words were blurring together. "I shouldn't have said anything," she said quietly. "It's none of your business." "You're right, it's not." Adrian returned to his own work. "Doesn't make it less true." They sat in silence again, but it felt different now, less careful. After a while, Vivian turned her laptop toward him. "Can I ask you something, professionally?" "Sure." "This restructuring agreement my father had me sign, does anything seem off to you?" Adrian pulled the laptop closer and started reading. His expression didn't change, but she saw his jaw tighten slightly about halfway down the second page. "Vivian," he said slowly, "have you read section 4 carefully?" "I skimmed it." "Don't skim. Read it." She pulled the computer back and focused on the section he'd indicated. In the event of operational disagreements regarding shared family assets, the primary trustee, Richard Hale, maintains unilateral authority to freeze or redirect financial resources pending resolution. Her stomach went cold. "That's a subordination clause," Adrian said quietly, disguised as conflict resolution language. Which means? Which means if your father decides he doesn't like how you're running your own projects, he can freeze your access to any assets that touch the family holdings, including capital you might need for deals. Vivian read it again, then a third time. "The Jakarta development," she said. "I used the family credit line as part of the backing." "Then he has leverage over it." "He wouldn't—" She stopped. Because of course he would. Control was what her father did best. "There's more," Adrian said, turning the laptop toward him again. "Look at section 7, the dissolution parameters." She read where he pointed. The room felt like it was getting smaller. "This gives him the power to restructure your entire business portfolio if he can prove significant mismanagement." She looked up at Adrian. "The burden of proof is on me to show I'm not mismanaging. That's backwards. Intentionally backwards." Vivian sat back, her coffee forgotten. "How long have you known about this?" "I started reviewing it yesterday. I wasn't sure if you'd seen these clauses or if they'd been presented differently." "They were presented as estate planning, family legacy protection." "They're a trap," Adrian said bluntly. "A very expensive, very sophisticated trap." Outside, the sky was starting to lighten. Vivian could hear sounds from the kitchen. Margaret starting breakfast, probably. "Why are you telling me this?" Vivian asked. "My father hired you." "He hired me to review the estate management, not to help him control his daughter's business." "He'll fire you." "Probably." Adrian shrugged. "I've been fired before." "This doesn't bother you?" "What bothers me is watching someone get systematically undermined by their own family." He met her eyes. "What are you going to do about it?" Vivian didn't have an answer. She felt like she'd been punched in the chest and was still trying to remember how to breathe. "I don't know," she admitted. "I signed it. It's legal. Legal doesn't mean unchangeable, but you'll need help." "From you?" "If you want it." He stood, finishing his coffee. "Think about it. I need to go check on Emma. She'll be up soon demanding those pancakes." He was at the door when Vivian spoke again. "Adrian?" He turned. "Thank you for telling me." "Thank me when we fix it," he said, and left. Vivian sat alone in the library as dawn broke over the frozen lake, staring at the document that had just revealed itself to be a cage disguised as inheritance. Her phone buzzed. Her father. "Family breakfast at 8. Don't be late?" She looked at the message for a long moment. Then she opened a new file on her laptop and started taking notes. If this was war, she was going to be ready. By the time Vivian made it to breakfast, she'd filled 12 pages of notes and consumed enough coffee to power a small city. Her hands were steady, but her mind was racing through scenarios and contingencies, mapping out the architecture of her father's betrayal, like it was just another construction project. The dining room was full of morning light and the smell of fresh pastries. Isabel was already seated, picking at a croissant. Their mother was pouring orange juice with practiced precision, and at the head of the table, her father sat reading the financial section like he owned the world, which, Vivian realized with cold clarity, he thought he did. "Good morning," she said, taking her usual seat. "You're up early," her mother observed. "I heard you in the library before 6. "Couldn't sleep." Her father glanced up from his paper. "Working?" "Always." "Good. I wanted to talk to you about the Jakarta project, actually. There are some concerns about the timeline." Vivian's fingers tightened on her coffee cup, but her voice stayed level. "What kind of concerns?" "We can discuss it later. This is family time." He folded his paper with deliberate care. "Where's Adrian this morning?" "Probably making pancakes," Vivian said before she could stop herself. Isabel hid a smile behind her napkin. "He seems like a devoted father," their mother said. "Such a tragedy about his wife. Emma is adorable, though, isn't she?" "She's 6, Vivian said. "Most 6-year-olds are adorable." "You know what I mean," She's well-behaved, polite. You can tell Adrian's doing a good job with her. Vivian wondered if her mother heard the implicit comparison, the suggestion that single fathers who made weird-shaped pancakes were somehow more successful parents than daughters who built skyscrapers. Probably not. Her mother rarely heard her own subtext. Breakfast dragged on with the usual small talk. Isabel mentioned a lunch meeting with a nonprofit board. Their mother discussed plans for New Year's. Their father checked his phone periodically, frowning at whatever he saw there. Vivian ate mechanically and planned her next move. When everyone finally dispersed, she went back to the library. Adrian was already there, Emma coloring at the small table while he worked at the desk. "Morning," he said without looking up. Emma wanted to draw. "I'm making a picture of the lake," Emma announced, holding up a piece of paper covered in blue crayon. "See? That's the ice. It's beautiful," Vivian said, and meant it. Emma beamed and went back to her masterpiece. Adrian pushed a folder across the desk toward Vivian. "I pulled the corporate filings for your family holdings. You should look at these." She sat down and opened the folder. Inside were printed documents, pages and pages of legal text, and corporate structures that looked like a spider's web designed by someone with a PhD in complexity. "What am I looking at?" "Your father created a shell company 18 months ago, Hale Properties Management, LLC. It's listed as the primary operational entity for all estate assets." Vivian scanned the documents. "I don't remember signing off on this." "You didn't, at least not directly. But look at the signature page on the restructuring agreement you signed in October." She flipped to the back of the document she'd been reviewing earlier. There it was, her signature, right below a paragraph of dense legal text she'd barely skimmed. "Section 12, Adrian said quietly. Subsection C. You authorize the transfer of management authority to the designated operational entity, which is the shell company he created. So I signed away my own authority without realizing it. In a nutshell, yes." Vivian set down the papers and pressed her fingers to her temples. A headache was building behind her eyes, the kind that came from fury and exhaustion mixing in equal measure. "How did you find this?" "Public records mostly, corporate registration databases. Your father's not hiding it. He just buried it in language most people wouldn't read carefully." Adrian leaned back in his chair. "The question is, what's he planning to do with it?" "Control," Vivian said. "That's what he always wants. Control over the assets, control over the business decisions, control over—" She stopped. "Over you," Adrian finished. Emma looked up from her coloring. "Daddy, can I have a snack?" "Sure, sweetheart. Check with Margaret in the kitchen." Emma bounced out of the room, leaving them alone. Vivian stood and walked to the window. Outside, the lake stretched white and frozen under a gray sky. It looked peaceful, deceptive. "He's been planning this for over a year," she said. "Maybe longer. Probably longer. This kind of structure takes time to build. And I just signed it, didn't even read it properly." "Don't do that," Adrian said. "Do what?" "Blame yourself for trusting your father. That's what he's counting on, that you'll turn the anger inward instead of outward." Vivian turned to face him. "You don't know him. I know men like him. I've worked for plenty of them." Adrian's expression was harder now, less neutral. They dress up control as protection. They call manipulation guidance. And they make you feel like you're the problem for questioning it. "So what do I do?" "We find the defects. Every legal structure has them. Something filed incorrectly, some requirement not met, some technicality that invalidates the whole thing." He tapped the folder. "I've already found one possibility." "Which is?" "The shell company registration. It lists your father as the sole officer and director, which is fine, but look at the registered agent." Vivian picked up the document and read where he pointed. Bennett and Lowe Legal Services. They went out of business 4 months ago. The firm dissolved. So the registration is technically invalid if the registered agent no longer exists and hasn't been updated. It's a small thing, but it could be leverage. But Vivian felt something shift in her chest, a small spark of what might have been hope or might have been rage. She wasn't sure which. "That's not enough, though," she said. "Not to undo everything." "No, but it's a start." Adrian stood and came to stand beside her at the window. "Look, I'm not a lawyer. You'll need one of those eventually, but I'm good at finding problems in financial structures. And this one has problems. Why are you helping me? It was the same question from earlier, but this time she really wanted the answer. Adrian was quiet for a moment, looking out at the frozen lake. Because my wife spent the last year of her life being gaslit by her own family about her medical decisions. They told her she was being dramatic, overreacting, making it harder on everyone by insisting on aggressive treatment. His jaw tightened. She died thinking she'd been a burden. Adrian, I'm not telling you this for sympathy. I'm telling you because I recognize what your family does to you. The way they talk to you, like you're the problem, like you're too sensitive or too ambitious or too something. He looked at her directly. I won't watch someone else get erased by people who claim to love them. The headache behind Vivian's eyes was worse now, or maybe it was just tears she refused to let fall. I'm sorry about your wife, she said quietly. Me too. He stepped back, putting professional distance between them again. But right now I'm more concerned about making sure your father doesn't succeed in whatever he's planning. Vivian's phone buzzed, her assistant. Call me when you can. Jakarta deal hit a snag. Her stomach dropped. I need to make a call. I'll give you privacy. But she was already dialing, pacing toward the corner of the library. Marcus, what's happening? Her assistant's voice came through tight with stress. The township board meeting got moved up. They're voting on the zoning variance tomorrow instead of next month. That's not possible. We have it scheduled. Someone requested an emergency session. And Vivian, there's opposition testimony registered. A lot of it. From who? I'm still digging, but some of it's coming from local business coalitions, property owner groups, people who shouldn't even have standing to object. Vivian's free hand curled into a fist. Who organized them? That's the thing. The coordination is too good. Someone with resources put this together. She didn't need to ask who. She already knew. I'll be there tomorrow, she said. Book me on the first flight out. Vivian, you're supposed to be on vacation. Book the flight, Marcus. She hung up and turned to find Adrian watching her. Problem? He asked. My father just tried to sabotage my biggest project. How? She explained quickly. The zoning variance, the moved-up vote, the mysteriously organized opposition. Adrian's expression darkened. That's not coincidence. No, it's strategy. Vivian grabbed her laptop and started pulling up files. He wants me dependent on the family resources. Can't have that if my independent projects succeed. When's the vote? Tomorrow afternoon. Then you need to be there. And you need to be prepared for whatever he's planning. I know how to handle a township board meeting. I'm sure you do, but you're not handling this alone. Adrian pulled out his phone. I'm coming with you. You don't have to. I know I don't have to. I'm choosing to. He was already typing. Emma can stay with Margaret. She'll be fine for a day. Adrian? Vivian. He looked up from his phone. Your father is using every resource he has to undermine you. You're allowed to have resources too. She wanted to argue. Wanted to insist she could handle it herself, the way she'd always handled everything herself. But the truth was, she was tired. Tired of fighting alone. Tired of pretending she didn't need help. Okay, she said. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. We still have to win. They spent the next 3 hours in the library, building a strategy. Adrian pulled records on the opposition groups, tracking funding sources and corporate connections. Vivian reviewed every detail of her zoning application, looking for weak points someone might exploit. Isabel found them at lunchtime, surrounded by papers and empty coffee cups. You two look intense, she said from the doorway. Everything okay? Fine, Vivian said automatically. Isabel gave her a look that said she wasn't buying it. Dad's been on the phone all morning. Something about business in Jakarta? Vivian and Adrian exchanged glances. It's nothing, Vivian said. It's clearly not nothing. Isabel came further into the room. Viv, what's going on? Nothing you need to worry about. That's not an answer. Isabel. No. Her sister's voice was sharper than usual. I'm not stupid, and I'm not blind. Something's happening, and it involves Dad, doesn't it? The silence stretched between them. Finally, Vivian sighed. He's trying to kill the Jakarta project. What? Why would he? Isabel stopped. Understanding dawned across her face. Because it's yours. Because you did it without him. More or less. That's insane. That's control. Vivian gestured at the papers spread across the table. And it's working, unless I can stop it. Isabel looked at the documents, then at Adrian, then back at Vivian. What can I do? Nothing. This isn't your fight. Stop it. We're sisters. Isabel pulled out a chair and sat down. I know things have been complicated between us. I know Mom and Dad compare us constantly, and I know that's not fair, but I'm not your enemy, Viv. Vivian felt something crack in her chest. You're their favorite. You always have been. And you think that's been easy for me? Isabel's laugh was bitter. Being the pretty one, the charming one, the one who does everything right. I'm 32 years old and I still can't make a decision without wondering what they'll think about it. At least you got out. You built something that's yours, which Dad is now trying to destroy. Then we don't let him. Isabel reached for one of the folders. What do you need? They worked through lunch and into the afternoon. Isabel, it turned out, had connections on several nonprofit boards that overlapped with the business coalitions opposing Vivian's project. She started making calls, quietly asking questions, gathering information. Adrian tracked money, shell companies funding opposition groups, donations from mysteriously named LLCs, payments to law firms that specialized in zoning appeals. And Vivian built her counterargument, point by point, statistic by statistic, until she had something that looked like a fighting chance. By 4 o'clock, Emma had returned from whatever adventure Margaret had taken her on, full of stories about the greenhouse and the old library ladder she'd been allowed to climb. Daddy, can Vivian come see the greenhouse too? She asked, tugging on Adrian's sleeve. Adrian looked at Vivian. Want a break? She should keep working, should review her notes one more time, run through her presentation, prepare for every possible objection. But Emma was looking at her with those dark eyes, hopeful and guileless, and Vivian found herself nodding. Sure. Show me the greenhouse. Show me the... They walked through the snow together, Emma chattering between them about the different plants Margaret had pointed out. The greenhouse was an old Victorian structure behind the main house, all glass and wrought iron, warm and humid inside despite the winter cold. Look, Emma said, dragging Vivian toward a corner. These are orchids. Margaret says they're really hard to grow, but these ones are doing good. Well, Adrian corrected gently. Doing well? Doing well, Emma repeated dutifully. Then to Vivian, do you like flowers? I do, Vivian said, surprising herself with the honesty. I don't get to see them much. My apartment doesn't get enough light. That's sad. Everyone should have flowers. Adrian smiled. That's a good philosophy, Em. They wandered through the greenhouse together, Emma providing commentary on every plant. Vivian felt something loosening in her chest, the constant tension she carried everywhere, always braced for the next criticism or comparison or subtle dig. Here, in this warm glass room with a 6-year-old girl explaining the difference between ferns and ivy, none of that existed. Vivian? Emma was looking up at her. Are you okay? You look sad. I'm not sad, Vivian said, just thinking. About what? About how nice it is here, with the flowers. Emma considered this. Want to pick some to take back? I don't think we should. Margaret says it's okay if you ask first. Come on. She took Vivian's hand and pulled her toward a section of winter blooms. Adrian followed, and for a few minutes they were just people picking flowers together, nothing more complicated than that. When they returned to the house, Vivian had a small bouquet of white hellebores, and her notes felt less overwhelming. Dinner that night was tense. Her father kept asking pointed questions about the Jakarta project. Vivian deflected with practiced ease, giving him nothing he could use. I heard the township meeting got moved up, he said over the main course. That must be stressful. It's fine. I can handle it. Of course you can. Though I wonder if you've considered that the project might be overextended. It wouldn't be shameful to scale back. I'm not scaling back. Pride, her father said, shaking his head. That's always been your weakness. Too proud to admit when you need help. Vivian set down her fork carefully. I'm not too proud. I'm just selective about who I ask. The temperature in the room dropped several degrees. Adrian spoke into the silence. Emma, finish your vegetables. But I don't like broccoli, Emma whined. 3 more bites, then you're done. It was such a normal parental moment that it somehow diffused the tension. Conversation limped forward to safer topics. After dinner, Vivian found Adrian on the back deck, looking out at the frozen lake. Emma was inside with Margaret, probably being coaxed toward bedtime. "Thanks," Vivian said. "For earlier. The distraction. Emma likes you. She's good at reading people." "She's 6. "Exactly. No filters yet. If she thinks you're good, you probably are." He glanced at her. "You ready for tomorrow?" "As ready as I'll get." "You'll do fine. You know your project inside and out. You just need to get past whatever he's thrown in your way. And if I can't, then we find another way. There's always another way." Vivian leaned against the railing, watching her breath cloud in the cold air. "Why does it matter to you? Really?" Adrian was quiet for a long moment. "Because watching talented people get crushed by systems designed to keep them small makes me angry. And because you remind me of Sarah, my wife. She was brilliant, surgeon, top of her field. But her family treated her like she was playing at being important." He paused. "I don't want to watch that happen to someone else when I can actually do something about it. I'm not your wife. I know. But you're someone worth fighting for anyway." The words hung in the cold air between them. "Adrian, I should go check on Emma." He pushed off from the railing. "We leave at 6 tomorrow. That work for you?" "Yeah, 6 is fine." He headed toward the door, then stopped. "Vivian? For what it's worth, I meant what I said at dinner last night. I wasn't looking at your sister. I was looking at you. And I saw someone who's been fighting her whole life just to be seen as she actually is." He met her eyes. "I see you." Then he was gone, and Vivian was alone on the deck with the cold and the dark and the most dangerous feeling she'd allowed herself in years. She went to bed late and slept poorly, her mind cycling through arguments and contingencies. When her alarm went off at 5, she felt like she'd been awake the whole time. By 6, she was dressed and packed. Adrian was already loading bags into an SUV, Emma still asleep in the guest house under Margaret's watch. "Ready?" he asked. "Ready." They drove in silence through the pre-dawn darkness, the roads empty and slick with ice. Vivian ran through her presentation in her head, anticipating questions, preparing rebuttals. The flight was short, 90 minutes that felt like 10. They landed, rented a car, and drove straight to the township building. The parking lot was already full. "That's not good," Vivian said. "That's expected. He organized them, remember?" Inside, the meeting room was packed. Vivian recognized some faces, local business owners, property developers, the usual crowd that showed up to zoning meetings. But there were others she didn't know, people in expensive suits who looked like they'd been imported for the occasion. Her assistant Marcus met them at the entrance. "It's bad. They've got 3 lawyers queued up to speak." "On what grounds?" "Traffic impact, environmental concerns, community character, the usual." "None of which apply." "I know, but they're making it sound convincing." The meeting started at 2. Vivian sat in the front row, Adrian beside her, while the opposition presented their case. They were good, professional. They had charts and traffic studies and petitions signed by people who probably didn't understand what they were signing. When it was Vivian's turn to respond, she stood and faced the board with every ounce of composure she'd ever learned. "Thank you for hearing me today," she began. "I'd like to address the concerns that have been raised." She went through them methodically. The traffic study that used outdated data, the environmental assessment that ignored the green space requirements she'd already committed to, the community character argument that conveniently overlooked the blighted properties her project would replace. She was halfway through when the doors at the back opened. Her father walked in. Vivian's voice caught for just a second. Then she continued, refusing to give him the satisfaction of seeing her rattled. Richard Hale took a seat in the back row and watched with the expression of someone evaluating a performance. Vivian finished her presentation. The board asked questions. She answered them clearly, confidently, backing up every claim with documentation. Then the public comment period opened. One by one, the opposition speakers stood. They were articulate and prepared and completely coordinated. This wasn't grassroots concern. This was manufactured resistance. And then her father stood. "Richard Hale," he said to the board. "Vivian's father, for those who don't know. I feel obligated to speak here because I have serious concerns about my daughter's ability to manage a project of this scope. Vivian's hands clenched in her lap. She's talented, don't misunderstand me, but she's young, inexperienced in some critical ways, and this project has significant financial exposure that could impact not just her company, but the broader family holdings that back it. He was doing it, in public, undermining her competence, questioning her judgment, all wrapped in the concern of a worried father. Vivian started to stand, but Adrian's hand on her arm stopped her. "Wait," he murmured. Her father continued, "I think a delay would be prudent. Time for more thorough review, more community input. There's no rush, after all." He sat down to polite applause from the opposition crowd. The board chair looked at Vivian. "Said, Hale, would you like to respond?" She stood, her mind racing. Every rebuttal she could think of sounded defensive. Anything she said would just confirm what her father had suggested, that she was too emotional, too reactive, too young. And then Adrian stood beside her. "If I may," he said, "I'm Adrian Cross. I've been consulting on estate management for the Hale family, which gives me some perspective here." The board chair nodded. "Go ahead, Mr. Cross." "Mr. Hale raises concerns about financial exposure. I'd like to address those directly." Adrian pulled out a folder. "I've reviewed Ms. Hale's project financing. It's sound. Conservative, actually. The family credit line represents less than 15% of the total capital stack, and there are multiple layers of protection in place." He walked to the front and handed copies to the board members. "Furthermore, the estate management structure, Mr. Hale references has some legal irregularities that are currently being addressed. Specifically, the registered agent for the operating entity is defunct, which calls into question the validity of any financial instruments issued under that authority." Vivian's father's face went red. Adrian continued calmly. "So the question isn't whether Ms. Hale's project is sound. It demonstrably is. The question is whether this board wants to make zoning decisions based on manufactured opposition funded by interested parties trying to protect their own market position." He laid out the funding connections. The shell companies. The law firms on retainer to developers who would benefit from Vivian's project failing. It took him less than 5 minutes to dismantle everything the opposition had built. When he finished, the room was silent. The board chair cleared his throat. "Thank you, Mr. Cross. That's illuminating." He looked at the other board members. "I move we vote on the variance as originally scheduled." "Second," another member said immediately. The vote was 4-1 in Vivian's favor. Outside afterward, Vivian leaned against the rental car and tried to remember how to breathe properly. "That was—" She stopped. "I don't even know what that was." "That was your father realizing he underestimated you," Adrian said, "and that you're not fighting alone anymore. He's going to retaliate." "Probably, but we'll be ready." Vivian looked at him. This man she'd known for less than 48 hours, who just walked into a hostile room and gone to war for her without hesitation. "Why did you do that?" "Because you deserved backup, and because watching him try to humiliate you made me angry." Adrian's expression was hard. "I don't like bullies, even when they're wearing expensive suits and calling it parenting." Her phone buzzed, a text from her father. "We need to talk." Vivian showed it to Adrian. "What are you going to do?" She thought about it, about years of these conversations, these power plays, these moments where she'd backed down to keep the peace. "No," she typed back, "we don't." She hit send and turned off her phone. "Let's go home," she said. "Emma's probably wondering where you are." They flew back in the late afternoon. The sun was setting when they pulled into the lake house driveway, painting the snow in shades of gold and pink. Emma came running out the moment she saw them, Margaret trailing behind. "Daddy, Vivian, Margaret and me made cookies, and we saved you some, and I made a snowman, and—" Adrian scooped her up. "Slow down, Em, we've got time." But Vivian knew that wasn't true. Time was the one thing they didn't have. Her father would be back soon, and when he came, he'd be ready for a different kind of fight. Inside, Isabel was waiting in the library with her laptop open and an expression Vivian had never seen before, something hard and determined. "We need to talk," Isabel said, "because I found something you're going to want to see." Vivian set down her bag and moved toward the library table where Isabel had spread out what looked like printed emails and bank statements. Adrian followed, Emma still in his arms, until he set her down gently. Why don't you go show Margaret your snowman?" he suggested. "But I want to stay with you and Vivian." "I know, sweetheart. We'll come find you in a few minutes, okay?" Emma's lower lip jutted out, but she nodded and trudged toward the kitchen with the heavy disappointment only a 6-year-old could muster. Once she was gone, Isabel looked up. Her eyes were red-rimmed, like she'd been crying or hadn't slept or both. "I started making those calls," she said, asking about the opposition groups. "And one of my contacts mentioned something weird, a donation from a trust I recognized. The Hale Family Charitable Foundation." Vivian's stomach tightened. "Dad's foundation?" "Our foundation, technically. You and I are listed as co-beneficiaries." Isabel pushed a printout across the table. "But I never authorized any donations to business coalitions, so I started digging through the foundation accounts. How did you get access to those?" "I'm on the board. I have login credentials. I just never bothered to use them before because—" Isabel's voice cracked slightly. "Because I trusted him. I thought he was handling everything properly." Adrian picked up the printout and scanned it. His jaw tightened. "What?" Vivian asked. "Your father's been using foundation funds to finance the opposition to your project. 50,000 here, 20,000 there, all coded as community development grants." He looked at Isabel. "How far back does this go?" 14 months, right around when—" Isabel stopped, her face going pale. "Right around when he had you sign the restructuring agreement." The pieces were clicking together in Vivian's mind, each one worse than the last. "He's been planning this for over a year, building the structure to control me, setting up the opposition to my projects, all of it coordinated." "There's more," Isabel said quietly. She pulled out another set of documents. "I found emails between Dad and his attorney. They're discussing how to redirect Vivian's focus and bring her back into the family sphere of influence." Vivian took the papers with hands that had started shaking. The emails were clinical in their brutality. Her father discussed her like she was a problem to be managed, an asset that had gone rogue and needed to be brought back under control. One line jumped out. "If the Jakarta project fails, she'll have no choice but to accept our terms. The financial exposure will force her hand." "He wanted it to fail," Vivian said. The words felt distant, like someone else was saying them. "He's been actively trying to destroy my company." "Not destroy," Adrian said grimly. "Control. If he destroys it, he gets nothing. But if he wounds it badly enough that you need his help to recover, then he has you." Isabel was crying now, quiet tears that she kept wiping away. "I'm so sorry, Viv. I should have known. I should have been paying attention." "You couldn't have known." "I could have. I just didn't want to see it. It was easier to pretend everything was fine, that Dad was just being protective, that you were being paranoid about the family dynamics." She laughed bitterly. "I was so stupid." "You weren't stupid," Vivian said. "You were his favorite. He had no reason to hurt you, so you had no reason to look." "But he was hurting you, all this time." "Yeah, he was." Adrian was still reading through the emails, his expression getting darker with each page. "This is fraud. He used charitable foundation funds for personal business interests. That's illegal." "Can we prove it?" Vivian asked. "These emails help, but we'd need more. Bank records showing where the money actually went, paper trails connecting the foundation to the opposition groups." He looked at Isabel. "How much access do you have to the foundation accounts?" "Everything. I can pull full transaction histories, grant applications, beneficiary information." She wiped her eyes. "What do you need?" "Everything you can get. Anything connected to Jakarta, to business coalitions, to legal fees paid out in the last 18 months. Isabel nodded and turned back to her laptop, fingers flying across the keyboard. Vivian walked to the window. Outside, the lake was dark under the evening sky, the ice reflecting the last traces of sunset. She felt numb and furious and something else she couldn't quite name. "He's my father," she said to no one in particular. "He's supposed to want me to succeed." Adrian came to stand beside her. Some fathers see their children as extensions of themselves. When the child tries to be separate, independent, it feels like betrayal. So he punishes them. So he tries to bring them back by any means necessary. Vivian pressed her forehead against the cold glass. I don't know if I can fight him. He has more resources, more connections, more everything. He has more money. That's not the same as more everything. Adrian's voice was steady. You have the truth. You have documentation. And you have people willing to stand with you. Why are you willing to stand with me? You barely know me. I know enough. He paused. Sarah's family did this to her. Not the financial manipulation, but the constant undermining, making her doubt herself, second-guess every decision. By the time she got diagnosed, she was so worn down that she almost didn't fight. His voice roughened. I can't help her anymore. But I can help you, if you'll let me. Vivian turned to look at him. In the fading light, she could see the grief etched into the lines around his eyes, the set of his jaw. This wasn't about her, not really. This was about his wife, about the fight he'd been too late to join. But maybe that was okay. Maybe motives didn't have to be pure to be real. Okay, she said. Help me. Behind them, Isabel made a small sound of triumph. Found it. The grant applications. They're fake, completely fabricated community groups that don't actually exist. The money went through, but there are no program reports, no outcomes, nothing. Print everything, Adrian said. We're going to need hard copies. They worked through dinner, ordering pizza that Emma helped Margaret pick out. The little girl had given up on understanding what the adults were doing and had settled into coloring at the small table, occasionally asking her father for a new crayon color. By 10 o'clock, they had a file 2 inches thick. Bank records, emails, fake grant applications, shell company registrations. Everything cross-referenced and organized. Vivian's phone had been buzzing periodically with calls from her father. She'd ignored everyone. He knows something's wrong, she said, looking at the latest missed call notification. Let him wonder, Adrian replied. We're not ready to confront him yet. When will we be ready? When we have everything buttoned up. No loose ends, no gaps he can exploit. He glanced at his watch. Emma needs to get to bed. I should take her back to the guest house. I'll walk with you, Vivian said. They bundled Emma into her coat and walked through the cold night air. The little girl was half asleep already, leaning against her father's shoulder. Is Vivian sad? Emma asked drowsily. A little bit, Adrian said. But she's going to be okay. Promise? I promise. At the guest house door, Adrian paused. You should try to get some sleep. Tomorrow's going to be hard. I know. Vivian looked at Emma's sleeping face. She's lucky to have you. I'm the lucky one. He shifted Emma's weight carefully. Vivian, what you said earlier about your father being supposed to want you to succeed. You're right. He should. The fact that he doesn't says everything about him and nothing about you. Before she could respond, he'd slipped inside, leaving her alone in the cold. Vivian walked back to the main house slowly, her mind spinning through scenarios. Her father would return tomorrow. She was sure of it. And when he did, she needed to be ready. Isabel was still in the library, staring at the piles of evidence. You should sleep, Vivian said. So should you. I will. In a minute. Isabel closed her laptop and looked at her sister. I hate that I didn't see this sooner. I hate that I was part of it, even if I didn't know. You weren't part of it. I was. Every time Mom compared us and I just sat there. Every time Dad praised me for being easier than you. I knew it hurt you, and I told myself it wasn't my fault, but her voice broke. It was my fault. I could have stood up for you. I could have said something. Vivian sat down across from her. You're saying something now. Too late. Better late than never. They sat in silence for a moment, 30 years of complicated sister dynamics hanging between them. I used to hate you, Vivian admitted. Not really hate, but resent, because everything came so easy to you. It didn't come easy. I just worked really hard to make it look easy. Isabel smiled sadly. That's what good daughters do, right? Make everything look effortless, never complain, never cause problems. And I caused problems. You caused change. That's different. Isabel reached across the table and took Vivian's hand. I'm proud of you. I should have said that years ago, but I'm saying it now. I'm proud of what you built, and I'm sorry our parents couldn't see it. Vivian squeezed her sister's hand, throat tight. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. Wait until we actually win this thing. They went upstairs together, and for the first time since they were children, it felt like they were on the same side. Vivian lay in bed staring at the ceiling, too wired to sleep. Her phone sat on the nightstand, dark and silent now. She picked it up and scrolled through her father's messages. We need to talk about your behavior today. I'm disappointed in how you handled the meeting. You're making a mistake. Call me. The last one had come an hour ago. I'll be at the house tomorrow morning. We're settling this. Vivian set the phone down and closed her eyes. Tomorrow, then. Tomorrow the real fight would begin. She must have slept eventually because she woke to pale morning light and the sound of a car in the driveway. Rolling out of bed, she went to the window and looked down. Her father's Mercedes. Right on schedule. Vivian dressed quickly and went downstairs. Adrian was already in the kitchen making coffee, looking like he hadn't slept much either. He's here, she said. I know, I saw him pull up. Where's Emma? Still asleep. Margaret's going to watch her. He handed her a mug. You ready? No, but I'm doing it anyway. The front door opened and closed, footsteps in the hallway. Then her father appeared in the kitchen doorway. Richard Hale looked older in the morning light, tired, angry. Vivian, we need to talk, privately. Anything you have to say, you can say in front of Adrian. Her father's eyes narrowed. This is family business. Adrian is helping me with family business. He stays. Fine. Richard pulled out a chair and sat down like he owned the place, which, technically, he did. Yesterday was embarrassing, for both of us. I don't recall being embarrassed. You should be. Airing our family matters in a public meeting, allowing this man to speak on your behalf like you can't handle your own affairs. Adrian spoke the truth, Vivian interrupted, which is more than you did. I spoke my concerns as your father. You spoke lies designed to sabotage my project. There's a difference. Richard's face flushed. Watch your tone. Or what? You'll freeze my accounts? Oh wait, you already tried that. Or maybe you'll use the foundation to fund more fake opposition groups? She leaned forward. We know, Dad. We know everything. The color drained from her father's face. What are you talking about? The emails, the foundation grants, the shell company with the invalid registration, all of it. Vivian's voice was steady now, cold. You built a trap, and I walked right into it. But the trap had defects, and we found them. I don't know what lies he's been telling you. Richard gestured at Adrian, but you're making a serious mistake. The only mistake I made was trusting you. Vivian stood. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to release any and all claims on my business assets. You're going to dissolve the shell company and void the restructuring agreement, and you're going to return every dollar you stole from the foundation. Richard laughed. Actually laughed. Or what? You'll sue me? I have the best lawyers in the state. I'll report you to the IRS, Vivian said calmly. Misuse of charitable funds is a federal crime. You'll lose the foundation, face massive penalties, and probably do time. You wouldn't. Try me. They stared at each other across the kitchen island. Vivian could see her father calculating, trying to find the angle, the leverage, the way to regain control. You're being emotional, he finally said. You're upset, and I understand that, but this is exactly why I structured things the way I did. You're too impulsive, too reactive. You need guidance. I need you to stop treating me like I'm incompetent. Then stop acting incompetent. Jakarta is overextended. Your management team is inexperienced, and you're burning through capital. Jakarta is fine. Better than fine. And the only reason it was ever in danger was because you were actively sabotaging it. Adrian set down his coffee mug with a sharp click. Mr. Hale, I think you should leave. Richard turned to him with cold fury. You. This is your doing, poisoning my daughter against me. I didn't have to poison anything. I just showed her the documents. She drew her own conclusions. You're fired, as of now. You can't fire me. I quit yesterday. Right after I filed a formal complaint with the Foundation's board about the misappropriated funds. Richard's face went purple. You had no right. I had every right. I'm a mandatory reporter under state law. When I discovered evidence of fraud, I was legally obligated to report it. Adrian's voice was flat, professional. The board will be conducting an audit. I imagine they'll have questions. The kitchen door opened and Isabel walked in, looking pale but determined. Behind her was their mother, who seemed confused by the tension. "What's going on?" their mother asked. "Richard, why are you shouting? Stay out of this, Helen." "Don't talk to her like that," Isabel said quietly. Richard turned to his younger daughter. "You too? You're siding with her." "I'm not siding with anyone. I'm standing up for what's right." Isabel walked to stand next to Vivian. "You used the foundation for personal business. You manipulated legal documents. You tried to destroy Vivian's company. That's not protecting family. That's control. You have no idea what you're talking about." "I have the emails, Dad. I have the bank records. I know exactly what I'm talking about." Their mother was looking between them, understanding slowly dawning. "Richard, what did you do?" "What I had to do to protect this family. By hurting our daughter? By teaching her that independence comes with consequences. By showing her that she needs us more than she thinks." Richard's voice was rising now, losing its carefully maintained control. "She's been ungrateful since the day she started that damn company, acting like she's better than us, like she doesn't need family." "I don't need this family," Vivian said. The words came out harder than she'd intended. "Not if this is what family means, not if it means being controlled and manipulated and sabotaged." Her mother's hand flew to her mouth. "Vivian, you don't mean that." "I do mean it. I'm done. I'm done pretending everything's fine. I'm done making myself smaller so everyone else can feel bigger. I'm done." Richard stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "If you walk away from this family, you walk away from everything. The estate, the foundation, all of it. Fine. You'll lose the security, the connections, the name. I don't need the name. I built my company without it. I'll keep building without it. You're making the biggest mistake of your life." "No, Dad. The biggest mistake of my life was believing you actually cared about my success." The silence that followed was absolute. Richard looked at his daughters, Isabel standing firm beside Vivian, their unified front something he'd never had to face before. Then he looked at his wife, who was staring at him like she'd never seen him before. "I want all of you out of this house by this evening," he said finally. "It's my house too," their mother said quietly. "And I'm not leaving." "Helen, no, I've been quiet for 30 years. I've let you run everything, make all the decisions, because I thought that's what good wives did." She straightened her shoulders. "But I won't let you do this to our daughters. Not anymore." Richard stared at her. "You're choosing them over me?" "I'm choosing what's right. There's a difference." For a moment, Vivian thought her father might actually explode. His face was red, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. Then, with visible effort, he controlled himself. "Fine. We'll see how long this little rebellion lasts. We'll see how tough you all are when the lawyers get involved." He looked at Vivian. "You want to play hardball? Let's play. I'll tie up your assets so tight you won't be able to buy coffee, let alone run a development company." "You can try," Adrian said. "But that restructuring agreement you're relying on, it's void. The shell company registration is invalid, which means any instruments issued under its authority are unenforceable." "You don't know what you're talking about." "I do, actually. I had it reviewed by 3 different attorneys yesterday. They all agreed." Adrian pulled out his phone and pulled up an email. "I can send you their analyses if you'd like." Richard snatched the phone and read the screen. His face went from red to white. "This is—" He stopped, started again. "You can't—" "We can, and we did." Adrian took his phone back. "So here's what's actually going to happen. You're going to sign the papers releasing Vivian's assets. You're going to dissolve the shell company properly, and you're going to cooperate with the foundation audit. If you do all that, we won't file criminal charges." "You're blackmailing me." "We're giving you a choice. That's more than you gave Vivian." The sound of small feet on the stairs broke the tension. Emma appeared in the doorway, rubbing her eyes. "Daddy, why is everyone yelling?" Adrian's expression softened instantly. "Sorry, sweetheart. We're just having a discussion." "It sounds like fighting." "Sometimes discussions get loud. It's okay." He glanced at the others. "Why don't you go find Margaret? I think she was making waffles." Emma looked uncertainly at the adults, sensing the tension even if she didn't understand it. Then she nodded and padded toward the kitchen, giving Vivian a small wave as she passed. The interruption seemed to drain some of the fight out of Richard. He looked suddenly older, diminished. "You've all turned against me," he said, and for the first time there was something other than anger in his voice, something that might have been hurt, or maybe just disbelief. "No," Vivian said. "We're just refusing to let you control us anymore. That's different. I'm your father. Then act like it. Stop trying to destroy me and start trying to understand me." Richard shook his head slowly. "I don't know how to do that." "Then maybe it's time to learn." He stood there for another long moment, looking at the family he'd tried so hard to control now standing united against him. Then, without another word, he turned and walked out. They heard the front door close. A moment later, his car started and pulled away. The silence he left behind felt enormous. Isabel was the first to move, going to their mother and pulling her into a hug. Helen Hale was crying quietly, the kind of tears that came from years of held breath finally released. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I should have seen it, should have stopped it." "It's not your fault, Mom," Isabel said. But Vivian wasn't so sure about that. Her mother had enabled her father's behavior for decades, smoothing over the rough edges, making excuses, keeping up appearances. She'd been complicit in her own way. Still, she'd stood up when it mattered. That had to count for something. Adrian touched Vivian's arm gently. "You okay?" "I don't know. Ask me in an hour." "Fair enough." They moved to the library where the files from last night were still spread across the table. Isabel brought their mother, who looked shell-shocked but present. "We need to file the paperwork today," Adrian said, "before he has time to move assets or create more complications." "What paperwork?" Helen asked. Vivian explained the situation, the Invalid Shell Company, the restructuring agreement, the foundation fraud. Her mother listened with growing horror. "I knew he was controlling," Helen said when Vivian finished. "But I didn't realize it had gone this far. I didn't realize he was trying to—" She couldn't finish the sentence. "Destroy my independence?" Vivian supplied. "Yes." They spent the next 3 hours with lawyers on speakerphone, reviewing documents, signing affidavits. Adrian coordinated everything with the efficiency of someone who'd done this before. By noon, they had filed papers to void the restructuring agreement, dissolve the shell company, and initiate a formal investigation into the foundation. By 2, Vivian's accounts were unfrozen and her assets were back under her control. By 3, they had confirmation that the foundation board was convening an emergency meeting to address the fraud allegations. And by 4, Vivian was sitting on the deck watching the frozen lake and trying to process what had just happened. Her father was gone. Not dead, not disappeared, just gone from her life in any meaningful way. She'd chosen that, chosen freedom over family, independence over acceptance. It should have felt like victory. Instead, it just felt like loss. Adrian found her there as the sun was starting to set, painting the ice in shades of gold and pink. "Emma wants to know if you'll come see the snowman she rebuilt," he said. "Apparently the first one fell over." "In a minute." He sat down beside her. "You did the right thing." "Did I?" "Yes. Absolutely yes." "Then why does it feel so bad?" "Because he's still your father, and some part of you still wanted him to be different than he is." Adrian was quiet for a moment. "When Sarah died, I was angry at her family for a long time, for not supporting her, for making her last year harder than it needed to be. But eventually I realized something." "What?" "That I couldn't change them. I could only control my own choices. And I chose to protect my daughter from people who would hurt her, even if those people were her grandparents." He looked at Vivian. "You made the same choice, to protect yourself from someone who is hurting you. That takes courage. It doesn't feel courageous. It feels like I broke something that can't be fixed. Maybe it was already broken. You just finally stopped pretending it wasn't." Vivian let that sink in. Maybe he was right. Maybe the relationship with her father had been broken for years, and she'd just been too afraid to admit it. "Come see the snowman," Adrian said gently. "Emma's been working on it for an hour. She used carrots for the arms because we ran out of sticks." Despite everything, Vivian smiled. Carrots for arms? Her design choice. I'm not questioning it. They walked across the snowy lawn together to where Emma had indeed built a snowman with carrot arms sticking out at odd angles. It was lopsided and slightly melting and completely charming. "What do you think?" Emma asked proudly. "I think it's perfect," Vivian said. "Want to help me build another one? We could make a whole family." Vivian glanced at Adrian, who shrugged with a small smile. "Sure," she said. "Let's build a family." They worked until the light faded and Emma's hands got too cold, building snow people of various sizes and dubious structural integrity. Isabel came out to help, and even their mother joined for a few minutes, laughing as they tried to roll a head that kept falling apart. It wasn't the family Vivian had been born into. But maybe, just maybe, it was the beginning of something better. That night, Vivian couldn't sleep. She kept replaying the morning in her head, her father's face when he realized he'd lost, the way her mother had finally chosen a side, the sound of his car pulling away. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw him standing in the kitchen, looking smaller than she'd ever seen him before. Around 2 a.m, she gave up and went downstairs. The house was dark except for a light coming from under the library door. She pushed it open and found Isabel at the desk, surrounded by more documents. "Can't sleep either?" Vivian asked. Isabel looked up, startled. "I keep thinking I missed something. Some other trap he set that we haven't found yet." "You've been looking for 3 hours?" "4, actually." Isabel rubbed her eyes. "I went through every email account I could access, every file on his computer that I have passwords for, and I found something." Vivian's stomach dropped. "What kind of something?" "More emails. Between Dad and his attorney. They're planning to activate the financial clause early, the one that lets him freeze your business interests if he claims mismanagement." "When?" "Tomorrow. They're filing the paperwork first thing in the morning." Isabel pushed the laptop toward Vivian. "Look at the timestamp. He sent this 4 hours after he left today. He's not backing down. He's escalating." Vivian read the email, her chest tightening with each line. Her father was claiming that her actions at the township meeting demonstrated reckless judgment and insufficient regard for fiduciary responsibility. He was arguing that her confrontation this morning proved she was emotionally unstable and unfit to manage assets tied to family holdings. "This is insane," Vivian said. "He's the one who committed fraud." "I know, but he's betting that he can tie everything up in litigation long enough to force you to negotiate. And he might be right." Isabel's voice was tight with frustration. Even if the shell company registration is invalid, he can still argue that the intent of the agreement should be honored. It could take months to resolve. "I don't have months. I have projects with deadlines, contracts with penalty clauses." "I know." Vivian sat down heavily. "We need Adrian." "It's 2 a.m. "I don't care. We need him now." She pulled out her phone and called. Adrian answered on the second ring, voice alert despite the hour. "Vivian, what's wrong?" "My father's filing to freeze my assets tomorrow morning. We need to stop him." There was a pause, then, "I'll be there in 5 minutes." He arrived in 4 wearing jeans and a sweater pulled on over what looked like pajama pants, hair disheveled from sleep. Emma was with him, drowsy and confused. "Margaret wasn't answering," he explained. "I didn't want to leave her alone." "It's fine." Vivian looked at Emma. "There's a couch in the living room. She can sleep there." They settled Emma on the couch with blankets, and she was asleep again before they'd even turned off the light. Then the 3 of them huddled in the library, reviewing the new emails. Adrian read in silence, his expression getting grimmer with each paragraph. "He's smart," Adrian said finally. "This filing is designed to look like genuine concern. Protective father worried about daughter's mental state and business decisions." "But it's retaliation," Vivian said. "Of course it is. But proving that is harder than you'd think." He pulled out his own laptop and started typing. "We need to get ahead of this. File our own motion before his hits the court." "On what grounds?" "Fraudulent inducement. We argue that the entire restructuring agreement was procured through deception, which voids any clauses within it, including the financial freeze provision." His fingers flew across the keyboard. "But we need something stronger, something that completely undermines his credibility." "Like what?" Adrian looked at Isabel. "You said you had access to all the foundation accounts?" "Yes." "Pull every transaction from the last 2 years. Every grant, every disbursement, every administrative fee. I want to see where all the money went." Isabel turned to her own computer, and for the next hour, The library was silent except for the sound of typing and the occasional rustle of papers. Vivian made coffee at 3:30. By 4, they had something. "Look at this," Isabel said, turning her screen toward them. The foundation made a $200,000 grant to something called Lakeside Community Advancement. "What is it?" Vivian asked. "That's the thing. I can't find any record of it existing. No website, no incorporation papers, no tax filings. It's a ghost." Adrian pulled up the corporate registry. "The address listed is a mailbox rental place in Connecticut. The registered agent is—" He stopped. "Your father's personal attorney." "So it's another shell company," Vivian said. "Looks like it. And if the pattern holds—" Adrian started cross-referencing databases. "Yes. Look, Lakeside Community Advancement made donations to 3 different PACs last year. All of them focused on zoning and development policy." "He was using foundation money to influence zoning boards," Isabel said slowly. "Not just to oppose your projects, to shape policy in his favor." "That's not just fraud," Adrian said. "That's a violation of federal tax law. Charitable foundations can't make political contributions. If the IRS finds out about this—" "They will find out," Vivian interrupted. "Because we're going to tell them." Adrian looked at her. "If you do that, he'll go to prison. Maybe. Probably." "Good." "Vivian, he tried to destroy my company. He committed fraud. He violated federal law. Why should I protect him?" "I'm not saying you should protect him. I'm saying you should think about what you want the end game to be here." Adrian's voice was gentle. "Because once you file this with the IRS, there's no taking it back. Your father will face criminal charges. Your family will be investigated. It'll be public and ugly, and it'll hurt everyone." Vivian thought about her mother, who'd already been through so much in the last 48 hours. About Isabel, who'd had her entire understanding of her family shattered. About the foundation itself, which did do some actual good work alongside the fraud. But then she thought about her father, planning to file papers to freeze her assets, planning to force her back under his control, planning to win through intimidation and manipulation, the way he always had. "File it," she said. "All of it. The foundation fraud, the shell companies, the fake grants, everything." Isabel was quiet for a long moment. Then she nodded. "I'll sign the complaint. As a foundation board member, it'll carry more weight." "Your father will never forgive either of you," Adrian warned. "He already hasn't forgiven us," Vivian said, "for being ourselves instead of who he wanted us to be. This doesn't change anything except the paperwork." Adrian drafted the complaint while the sun came up outside, painting the frozen lake in shades of pink and gold. By 7, they had a document detailing every fraudulent transaction, every shell company, every violation they could find. By 8, it was filed with the IRS and the State Attorney General's office. By 9, Vivian's phone was ringing with calls from her father's attorney. She let them all go to voicemail. At 10, someone knocked on the front door. Vivian answered it to find a process server holding an envelope. "Vivian Hale? That's me?" "You've been served." She took the envelope and closed the door. Inside was exactly what she'd expected. Her father's motion to freeze her assets, wrapped in legal language about fiduciary responsibility and protective intervention. She handed it to Adrian without reading past the first page. "He filed it anyway, even knowing we'd filed the IRS complaint." "Of course he did. He's not backing down." Adrian scanned the document. "This is ugly. He's claiming you're mentally unstable, citing your erratic behavior at the township meeting and your sudden estrangement from family. He's painting you as having some kind of breakdown. That's absurd. It's also strategic. If he can make you look unstable, any business decisions you make can be questioned." Vivian felt rage building in her chest, hot and tight. "So what do we do?" "We show up to court tomorrow with every piece of evidence we have. We prove that he's the one who's been acting in bad faith, and we hope the judge sees through his performance. And if the judge doesn't, then we appeal, and we keep fighting until we win or run out of options." Adrian set down the papers. "But Vivian, you need to prepare yourself for the possibility that this gets worse before it gets better. Your father has resources. He has connections. He's going to use all of them." Before Vivian could respond, her mother appeared in the hallway looking pale. "I just got a call from your father's attorney," Helen said. They're claiming I'm mentally incompetent. They want to put me under some kind of guardianship arrangement. The rage in Vivian's chest turned to ice-cold fury. What? They're saying I've been influenced by you and Isabel, that I'm not capable of making sound decisions. Her mother's hands were shaking. They want to control my access to accounts, my medical decisions, everything. He can't do that, Isabel said, coming down the stairs. You're not incompetent. You're just finally standing up to him. That's exactly why he's doing it, Adrian said grimly. He's trying to isolate you, take away your allies. If he can prove your mother is incompetent and Vivian is unstable, then Isabel is the only one left standing, and he'll work on her next. This is insane, Vivian said. We're talking about my father like he's some kind of criminal mastermind. He's a controlling man who's losing control, Adrian corrected. That makes him dangerous, especially when he has money and lawyers. Emma wandered in from the living room, rubbing her eyes. Daddy, I'm hungry. The tension in the room shifted instantly. Adrian's expression softened. Okay, sweetheart, let's get you some breakfast. Can Vivian come? Adrian looked at Vivian, who nodded despite the chaos swirling in her head. In the kitchen, they made pancakes. Emma helping to pour the batter while chattering about the snowmen outside and whether they'd still be there tomorrow. The normalcy of it felt surreal against the backdrop of legal warfare. Vivian's phone rang again. This time it was Marcus, her assistant. Vivian, we have a problem. What kind of problem? Your father's attorney contacted our Jakarta partners. They're suggesting you might not be mentally fit to continue managing the project. Vivian closed her eyes. When? This morning. I've been fielding calls for the last hour. Our partners are concerned. They want reassurance. Tell them I'm fine. Tell them it's a family dispute with no bearing on the project. I tried that. They want to hear from you directly. And Vivian, Marcus paused. They're asking for documentation, medical evaluations, psychological assessments. They're taking this seriously. Because my father made it sound serious. Yes. Vivian looked at Adrian, who was flipping pancakes while Emma supervised. At Isabel, who was making coffee with shaking hands. At her mother, who looked like she'd aged 10 years overnight. Set up a call for this afternoon, Vivian said. I'll handle it. She hung up and pressed her palms against the cool marble countertop, trying to breathe through the rage and fear. He's going after my partners now, she said to no one in particular, trying to make them doubt me. That's what abusers do, Adrian said quietly, setting down his spatula. They isolate you, make everyone else question your reality so you have nowhere to turn. I'm not being abused. This is just a legal fight. Vivian, he looked at her directly. What your father is doing is abuse. Sophisticated, legal, expensive abuse, but abuse nonetheless. She wanted to argue, wanted to insist that her father was just controlling, just difficult, just set in his ways. But the evidence was right there, the systematic undermining, the manipulation, the attempts to destroy her credibility and isolate her from support. I hate him, she said, and the words felt like truth. That's okay, Adrian said. You're allowed to hate him. He's my father. That doesn't mean you have to love him, especially not when he's treating you like this. Emma tugged on Vivian's sleeve. Don't be sad. Pancakes fix everything. Despite herself, Vivian smiled. Do they? Yep, Daddy says so. Your daddy is very wise. They ate breakfast together at the kitchen island, Emma entertaining them with a long story about a girl at her school who claimed to have seen a real fairy. The temporary normalcy was a gift Vivian hadn't known she needed, but it couldn't last. At noon, Vivian's mother received official papers. Her father was indeed filing for a competency hearing. At 1, Vivian got an email from one of her board members asking if the rumors about her mental health were true. At 2, Isabel discovered that their father had locked her out of several family accounts she'd previously had access to. By 3, they were back in the library with Adrian, trying to figure out how to fight on multiple fronts simultaneously. We need more evidence, Adrian said. Something that completely undermines his credibility before tomorrow's hearing. We have the foundation fraud, Isabel said, which won't be investigated in time. We need something immediate, something the judge can see and understand right away. Vivian thought about the emails, the shell companies, the years of systematic control. There had to be something they were missing, Some piece of evidence that would... Her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. Hello? Ms. Hale? This is Jennifer Chen from the Foundation Board. I apologize for calling directly, but I thought you should know. We've been conducting an emergency review of the Foundation's activities following the complaint filed this morning. Yes? We found additional irregularities, significant ones. I can't discuss details over the phone, but I wanted to ask, would you be available to meet with the board this afternoon? We have some questions about transactions your father authorized. Vivian looked at Adrian, who'd been watching her face. What time? 4 o'clock at the Foundation offices downtown. I'll be there. She hung up and explained quickly. This could be it, Adrian said. Chamtid. If the board has found more evidence of fraud and they're willing to go on record, it might be enough to discredit everything Dad's trying to do, Vivian finished. I'm coming with you, Isabel said. Me too, their mother added quietly. Mrs. Hale, are you sure? Adrian asked. If you testify against your husband, he's already trying to have me declared incompetent. I don't see how it could get worse. Helen's voice was steady for the first time in days. And I'm tired of being silent. If there's evidence of wrongdoing, the board should know everything. They drove to the Foundation offices together, leaving Emma with Margaret. The building was downtown, all glass and steel, with the Hale family name prominently displayed on the entrance. Jennifer Chen met them in the lobby, a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s who introduced herself as the Foundation's audit chair. Thank you for coming on short notice, she said, leading them to a conference room. We've been reviewing transactions all morning, and we have concerns. The conference room table was covered in documents. 3 other board members were already there, looking grave. Ms. Hale, Mrs. Hale, Jennifer said, gesturing to chairs. We need to ask you some questions about Foundation operations, specifically about grant approvals and fund disbursements over the last 3 years. For the next 2 hours, they went through everything. The board had found not just the shell companies Vivian and Adrian had discovered, but others. Fake grants, inflated administrative fees, consulting payments to companies that didn't exist. We estimate approximately $1.2 million has been misappropriated, Jennifer said. All of it authorized by your father, Mrs. Hale. Helen looked like she might be sick. I had no idea. I trusted him to manage the Foundation properly. Did he ever discuss Foundation business with you? No. He said it was boring administrative work, that I didn't need to worry about it. Did he ever ask you to sign documents without explaining them? Helen's silence was answer enough. Mrs. Hale, we're going to need a formal statement from you, Jennifer said gently, about what you knew and when you knew it. I understand this is difficult. I'll give you whatever you need. Helen's voice was stronger now. If my husband has been stealing from a charitable foundation, he needs to face consequences. Isabel provided her statement next, explaining how she had discovered the first fraudulent grants and started investigating. She handed over printouts of all the emails she'd found, the bank records, everything. When they finally left the Foundation offices, it was nearly 7. The sun had already set and the temperature had dropped. The board is filing their own criminal complaint, Vivian said as they walked to the car, against Dad, for embezzlement and fraud. Good, Helen said firmly. Mom, are you okay? No, but I will be. She looked at her daughters. I should have left him years ago. I knew he was controlling. I knew he was cruel sometimes, but I told myself it wasn't that bad. That I was exaggerating, that he was just stressed or concerned or... Her voice broke. I made excuses for him, and in doing that, I let him hurt both of you. Mom, Isabel started. No, I need to say this. I should have protected you. Both of you. I should have stood up to him when you were children, when it would have mattered more. I didn't, and I'm sorry. Vivian felt tears stinging her eyes. You stood up now. That matters. Does it? After 30 years of silence? Yes, Vivian said. It does. They drove back to the lake house in silence. When they arrived, Adrian's SUV was still in the driveway, and lights were on in the main house. Inside, they found Adrian and Emma in the living room. Emma was curled up on the couch, watching a movie, while Adrian worked on his laptop. How'd it go? He asked. The Foundation board found over $1 million in fraudulent transactions, Vivian said. They're filing criminal charges. Adrian's eyebrows rose. That's Significant. It gets better, or worse, depending on how you look at it. Vivian pulled out her phone. The board's attorney called while we were driving back. They're requesting an emergency injunction to freeze all of Dad's access to foundation accounts and assets. The hearing is tomorrow morning. Same time as your father's hearing to freeze your assets, Adrian said. Yes. So tomorrow you'll both be in court. Him trying to prove you're incompetent to manage your own business. You trying to prove he's a criminal. Basically, Adrian closed his laptop. Emma, time for bed. But the movie's not over, Emma protested. You can finish it tomorrow. Come on. He carried his daughter upstairs to the guest room, leaving the three women alone. I'm terrified, Vivian admitted. Me too, Isabel said. Me 3, their mother added. Then she laughed, a slightly hysterical sound. Your father is going to lose everything. The foundation, the respect, possibly his freedom. And it's our fault. It's his fault, Vivian corrected. We just stopped covering for him. I know, but he won't see it that way. He'll blame us. He'll never forgive us. Good, Isabel said. I don't want his forgiveness. I want him to leave us alone. Adrian came back downstairs. Emma wants you to come say goodnight, he told Vivian. Me? You. Specifically you. She was very clear about it. Vivian went upstairs feeling off balance. Emma was already in bed, surrounded by pillows. Hi, Vivian said from the doorway. Are you still sad? A little bit. Daddy says when you're sad, you should think about 3 good things. That's good advice. What are your 3 good things? Vivian thought about it. Well, I have my sister back. That's one good thing. What else? I stood up to someone who was hurting me. That's scary, but it's also good. And the 3rd thing? Vivian looked at this little girl with her dark eyes and serious expression and felt something shift in her chest. I made a new friend, she said. Actually, I made 2, you and your dad. Emma smiled. We're good friends, the best kind. What's the best kind? The kind that stays even when things are hard. Vivian's throat tightened. Yeah, that is the best kind. She kissed Emma's forehead and left before the tears could fall. Downstairs, Adrian was making tea. She's asleep, Vivian said. Good. She was worried about you. She told me. Adrian handed her a mug. Tomorrow's going to be rough. I know. But you're ready for it. You have evidence, you have witnesses, you have the truth on your side. What if it's not enough? Then we appeal. And we keep fighting. But Vivian, he turned to face her fully. I think it will be enough. Your father built his power on secrecy and control. You've taken both away from him. The foundation board has evidence. Your mother and sister are willing to testify. And most importantly, you're not backing down. I'm terrified I'll back down. You won't, because backing down would mean letting him win. And you've spent 30 years losing to him. You're done losing. Vivian wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that she could actually win this fight. Adrian, why are you really doing this? And don't say it's because of your wife. There's something else. He was quiet for a long moment, looking into his tea. When Sarah died, Emma was 3. Too young to really understand what was happening, but she knew her mom was gone, and she knew people were sad, and she knew her grandparents, Sarah's parents, were angry. He paused. They blamed me. Said I'd pushed Sarah to get aggressive treatment when she should have accepted her prognosis. Said I'd made her last months painful instead of peaceful. They tried to take Emma from me, claimed I was an unfit parent because I was too grief-stricken to care for her properly. Adrian, I had to fight them in court, prove I was a good father, prove I could take care of my own daughter. And I did it alone because Sarah's entire family had turned against me. His voice was rough. So when I see your father trying to do the same thing to you, isolate you, claim you're incompetent, take away your autonomy, I can't not help. Because I know what it's like to fight that fight, and I know how much easier it is when you're not alone. Vivian set down her tea and did something she hadn't let herself do in years. She reached out and took his hand. I'm sorry, she said. About your wife, about her family, about all of it. I'm sorry about your father. He made his choices. So did Sarah's parents. Doesn't make it hurt less. They stood there in the quiet kitchen, holding hands like lifelines, while the old house settled around them. Tomorrow, Vivian thought, tomorrow would be the reckoning. Tomorrow, her father would face the consequences of his own actions, and she would finally be free. Or she'd lose everything. Either way, at least she wouldn't be facing it alone. Vivian woke at 4:30 to find she'd barely slept at all. Every time she'd closed her eyes, her mind had raced through worst-case scenarios. The judge siding with her father, her business frozen, her credibility destroyed in front of everyone who'd ever doubted her. She gave up on sleep and went downstairs in the dark. The kitchen was empty, but someone had already made coffee. She poured a cup and stood at the window watching the lake turn from black to gray as dawn approached. Couldn't sleep either. She turned to find Adrian in the doorway, looking as exhausted as she felt. "No, you?" Emma had a nightmare around 3. Took me an hour to get her back down. He poured his own coffee and came to stand beside her. "You ready?" "I don't think ready is the right word." "What's the right word?" Vivian thought about it. "Resolved. I'm resolved to see this through, no matter what happens." "That's better than ready, anyway." They stood in silence, drinking coffee and watching the sun come up. The sky was the color of steel, heavy with clouds that promised more snow. "My father's going to be there," Vivian said, "in the courtroom, sitting across from me while I testify about his crimes." "Probably." "I don't know if I can look at him." "Then don't. Look at the judge. Look at me. Look anywhere else." Adrian set down his mug. "But Vivian, if you do look at him, don't let him make you feel small. You're not the one who should be ashamed today." At 6, Isabel came down, followed by their mother at 6:30. They ate breakfast in near silence, everyone lost in their own thoughts. Emma appeared around 7, confused about why everyone was up so early and dressed so formally. "Are you going somewhere important?" she asked Vivian. "Very important." "Like a princess thing?" Vivian smiled despite her nerves. "Sort of. More like a fighting a dragon thing." "Oh, do you have a sword?" "I have something better. I have the truth." Emma considered this seriously. "That's a good sword." They left at 8. Adrian stayed behind with Emma, but he walked Vivian to the car. "Call me as soon as it's over," he said. "I will." "And Vivian, you're going to win, not because you deserve it, though you do, but because your father made mistakes and you found them. That's how this works." She wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that justice would actually prevail and truth would matter more than money or connections. But she'd lived in her father's world long enough to know that wasn't always how things worked. The courthouse was downtown, a granite building that looked like it had been designed to intimidate. Vivian's hands were shaking as they walked through security. Her attorney met them in the hallway, a woman named Sarah Merchant, who specialized in financial fraud and had come highly recommended. "The foundation's hearing is at 9, Sarah said. "Yours is at 10. The good news is, if the judge grants the injunction against your father in the first hearing, it'll strengthen our position in the second. And if they don't grant it, then we fight harder." At 8:45, they entered the courtroom for the foundation hearing. It was smaller than Vivian had expected, with wooden benches and fluorescent lights that made everyone look slightly ill. Her father was already there, sitting with his attorney at the defendant's table. He looked composed, expensive suit perfectly pressed, silver hair immaculate. When Vivian walked in, his eyes found hers across the room. The look he gave her was pure ice. Vivian forced herself to breathe and sat down in the gallery with Isabel and her mother. The foundation's attorney, a man named David Park, was at the plaintiff's table with Jennifer Chen and another board member. The judge entered at 9 sharp. Judge Patricia Williamson was in her 60s, with gray hair pulled back severely and reading glasses that made her look like she suffered no fools. "We're here regarding the emergency petition filed by the Hale Family Charitable Foundation," she said, looking at the papers in front of her. "Mr. Park, you may proceed." David Park stood and laid out the case methodically. The fraudulent grants, the shell companies, the $1.2 million in misappropriated funds. He had documents, bank records, email chains, everything organized and color-coded. Richard Hale's attorney tried to argue that it was all a misunderstanding, that the grants were legitimate and properly documented. Then David called Jennifer Chen to the stand. Jennifer testified about the board's investigation, about the fake companies and invalid addresses. She presented evidence that would have made any legitimate charity board member sick. "Mrs. Chen, In your professional opinion, do these transactions constitute fraud? David asked. Yes, absolutely yes. Richard's attorney cross-examined, trying to suggest the board was biased, that they were being influenced by family drama. Mrs. Chen, isn't it true that Richard Hale's daughters filed the initial complaint? Yes. And isn't it possible that this entire investigation is motivated by a family dispute rather than actual wrongdoing? Jennifer looked at the attorney with the kind of contempt that came from someone who'd spent 40 hours reviewing fraudulent paperwork. I've been on this board for 12 years, she said. I've reviewed thousands of grants. These aren't oversights or bookkeeping errors. These are systematic, deliberate acts of fraud. The motivation for discovering them is irrelevant to the fact that they exist. The attorney had no response to that. David called two more witnesses, a forensic accountant who'd traced the money, and an IRS agent who confirmed that the transactions violated federal tax law. By the time the foundation rested its case, Richard Hale looked significantly less composed. The judge reviewed her notes, then looked at the defendant's table. Mr. Hale, do you wish to testify on your own behalf? Richard stood. Yes, Your Honor. He took the stand with the confidence of someone who'd never faced real consequences for anything. He spoke about his decades of service to the community, his commitment to charitable work, his dedication to the foundation. He claimed the grants in question were all legitimate, that the shell companies were simply administrative structures he'd created to streamline operations. Sometimes in the pursuit of efficiency, paperwork gets overlooked, he said smoothly. But there was never any intent to defraud or misappropriate funds. David Park's cross-examination was surgical. Mr. Hale, you claim these shell companies were for administrative efficiency. Can you name a single employee of Lakeside Community Advancement? Richard hesitated. It was managed by contractors. Can you name a contractor? I'd have to check my records. What about the company address? You listed it as 847 Riverside Drive in Hartford. What's located at that address? Office space, I believe. It's a UPS store, Mr. Hale. A mailbox rental facility. David pulled up a photo. Is this the office space you used to manage $200,000 in charitable grants? Richard's composure was starting to crack. I don't recall the specific. You don't recall authorizing a six-figure grant to a company operating out of a mailbox. It was handled by my attorney, who is also listed as the registered agent for the shell company. The same attorney sitting next to you right now. The courtroom was dead silent. David continued. Mr. Hale, can you explain why foundation funds were used to make donations to political action committees focused on zoning policy? I'm not aware of any such donations. Your Honor, I'd like to enter Exhibits 17 through 23. David handed papers to the judge. Bank records showing transfers from Lakeside Community Advancement to 3 different PIACs, all of which subsequently spent money opposing development projects that competed with Hale family business interests. The judge reviewed the documents, her expression growing harder with each page. Mr. Hale, she said, did you use charitable foundation funds to advance your personal business interests? No, Your Honor. There must be some mistake. The bank records appear quite clear. Richard's attorney stood. Your Honor, my client needs time to review these allegations with counsel. I'm sure he does. Judge Williamson set down the papers. I'm granting the foundation's petition for an emergency injunction. Mr. Hale, you are hereby prohibited from accessing, transferring, or managing any foundation accounts or assets pending a full investigation. Furthermore, I'm referring this matter to the district attorney's office for potential criminal charges. Richard's face went white, then red. This is outrageous. I'm taking the word of bank records and email evidence, Mr. Hale, which is considerably more reliable than your testimony has been this morning. The judge looked at her clerk. We're adjourned. Next case at 10. The courtroom erupted in murmurs as people filed out. Vivian sat frozen, trying to process what had just happened. Her father had lost. Completely. Publicly. And now came her turn. They had 15 minutes before the next hearing. Vivian used the bathroom and splashed cold water on her face, trying to calm her racing heart. When she came out, her father was in the hallway, flanked by his attorney. He saw her and broke away, striding toward her before anyone could stop him. "This is your doing," he said, voice low and venomous. "You destroyed me. Your own father." "No," Vivian said, surprising herself with how steady her voice was. "You destroyed yourself. I just stopped pretending I didn't see it. I gave you everything, every opportunity, every advantage. You gave me control disguised as love. And when I tried to be my own person, you tried to destroy me for it. I tried to protect you from your own bad decisions. You tried to trap me. There's a difference." Her mother appeared, positioning herself between them. "Richard, leave her alone." "Helen, you don't understand what she's—" "I understand perfectly. I've been watching you manipulate and control our daughters for 30 years. I just finally admitted to myself what I was seeing." Richard stared at his wife like he'd never seen her before. "You're choosing them over me." I'm choosing what's right over what's easy. I should have done it years ago." He looked between the three women, his wife, his daughters, all standing united against him. And for the first time, Vivian saw something other than anger or control in her father's eyes. She saw loss, but she couldn't let herself feel sorry for him. Not when he'd spent years making her feel worthless. "The hearing starts in 5 minutes, Sarah Merchant said, appearing at Vivian's elbow. "We should go in." The second courtroom was larger, already filling with people. Vivian recognized some faces from her business world, others from the township meeting. Word had spread fast about the morning's hearing, and now people wanted to see what happened next. Adrian slipped in just as the judge entered, a different judge this time, a man named Robert Chen, who looked about 50 and intensely unimpressed with everyone. "We're here on the emergency motion filed by Richard Hale, seeking to freeze the business assets of his daughter, Vivian Hale, on grounds of mental incompetence and fiduciary irresponsibility," Judge Chen said. "Mr. Morrison, you may present your case." Richard's attorney stood and began his argument. He painted Vivian as emotionally unstable, citing her erratic behavior at the township meeting, her sudden estrangement from family, her reckless business decisions. "Ms. Hale has demonstrated a pattern of impulsive choices that put significant family assets at risk," Morrison said. "Her father, out of genuine concern, is seeking temporary oversight to prevent further damage." He called a psychiatrist as an expert witness, someone who'd never met Vivian, but who testified that based on the described behavior, she might be experiencing a manic episode or other mental health crisis. It was infuriating, clinical, designed to make Vivian sound like she was on the verge of collapse. Then it was Sarah Merchant's turn. "Your Honor, the plaintiff's case rests on the assumption that Mr. Hale is acting out of parental concern. I'd like to present evidence that his true motivation is retaliation and control." She walked the judge through everything: the restructuring agreement with its subordination clauses, the invalid shell company, the attempts to sabotage the Jakarta project, the foundation fraud that had just been proven in the previous hearing. Mr. Hale has spent over a year systematically building legal and financial structures designed to trap his daughter and force her back under his control, Sarah said. When she discovered these structures and fought back, he filed this motion claiming she's mentally incompetent. It's a classic Darvo tactic: deny, attack, reverse victim, and offender. Morrison tried to object, but the judge waved him off. "I'd like to call Vivian Hale to the stand," Sarah said. Vivian's legs felt like water as she walked to the witness box. She placed her hand on the Bible and swore to tell the truth, then sat down. Sarah asked her basic questions first, about her education, her business, her track record of success. Then she got to the harder questions. "Ms. Hale, your father claims you've been acting erratically. Can you explain what actually happened at the township meeting?" Vivian took a breath. "My father organized opposition to my development project using fraudulent entities and misappropriated foundation funds. When I presented evidence of this at the meeting, he attempted to undermine my credibility by suggesting I was too young and inexperienced to manage the project. Adrian Cross, who'd been helping me investigate the fraud, presented evidence that exposed my father's actions. My father is calling that erratic behavior because it wasn't behavior he could control." "And your estrangement from your family?" "I didn't estrange myself. I set boundaries. When my father tried to violate those boundaries by attempting to freeze my assets, I fought back. That's not mental illness. That's self-preservation." Morrison's cross-examination was aggressive. He tried to make Vivian sound paranoid, suggesting she'd misinterpreted innocent business structures as sinister plots. Ms. Hale, isn't it possible you're simply in over your head with your business ventures, that your father's concern is legitimate? No. Your Jakarta project has significant financial exposure, which is managed responsibly with multiple layers of protection. My father tried to sabotage it not because it was risky, but because it was succeeding without him. That sounds like a conspiracy theory. It's not a theory. We have emails where he explicitly discusses how to redirect my focus and force my hand by making the project fail. Morrison looked thrown. I haven't seen those emails. That's because we just discovered them 3 days ago. They're in the supplemental evidence we filed this morning. Sarah stood. Your Honor, I'd like to enter the email correspondence as Exhibit A. The judge reviewed the emails Isabel had found. His expression grew increasingly grim. Mr. Morrison, he said, did you know about these communications when you filed this motion? No, Your Honor. No. My client assured me this was about legitimate parental concern. Your client appears to have misled you. The judge looked at Richard. Mr. Hale, would you like to explain these emails? Richard stood, composure completely gone now. Those were taken out of context. I was simply discussing how to sabotage your daughter's business to force her back under your control. The judge's voice was cold. That's what these emails describe, Mr. Hale, in detail. She needs guidance. She's always been impulsive. She's a 30-year-old billionaire with a successful company. The only impulsive thing I see here is your decision to file this motion after being caught committing fraud. The courtroom was silent. Judge Chen reviewed his notes, then looked at both attorneys. I'm denying the motion to freeze Ms. Hale's assets. Furthermore, I'm issuing a restraining order prohibiting Mr. Hale from interfering with his daughter's business operations in any way. Any violation will result in contempt charges. Vivian felt something release in her chest. Tension she'd been carrying so long she'd forgotten it was there. Your Honor, Sarah said, we'd also like to request that the court void the restructuring agreement Ms. Hale signed on grounds of fraudulent inducement. Granted, the agreement is void as of today. The judge looked at Richard. Mr. Hale, you came into my courtroom claiming to be a concerned father. Instead, you've revealed yourself to be something considerably less admirable. I suggest you reflect on that. He banged his gavel. We're adjourned. The courtroom erupted. Vivian sat in the witness box, feeling like she might cry or laugh or possibly both. Sarah was smiling, actually smiling, which Vivian had been told she rarely did. Adrian was suddenly there, helping her down from the witness box. You did it, he said. You actually did it. We did it, Vivian corrected. I couldn't have done any of this without you. Across the courtroom, her father was arguing with his attorney in harsh whispers. He looked older now, diminished. The power he'd wielded so effortlessly for decades had evaporated in less than 2 hours. Vivian's mother approached Richard, and for a moment, Vivian thought she might try to comfort him. Instead, Helen Hale stood straight and looked at the man she'd been married to for 35 years. I want a divorce, she said clearly, and I'm keeping the lake house. Richard's mouth opened and closed. No words came out. Helen turned and walked back to her daughters. I should have said that 20 years ago. Isabel hugged her, and Vivian joined in, and for a moment they were just 3 women who'd survived something terrible together. Outside the courthouse, reporters were gathering. Someone had tipped them off about the hearings, and now they wanted statements about the prominent businessmen facing fraud charges. No comment, Sarah said firmly, steering them toward the parking garage. They drove back to the lake house in a daze. Vivian kept expecting to feel triumphant, victorious. Instead, she just felt tired and sad and strangely empty. She'd won. Her father had lost. But winning meant accepting that her family was broken in ways that couldn't be fixed. Emma was waiting on the front steps when they pulled up, Margaret hovering behind her. Did you fight the dragon? Emma asked immediately. I did, Vivian said. Did you win? Yes. Good. I made you a victory cookie. Emma held up something that looked like it had once been cookie-shaped, but was now mostly crumbs. It got a little broken, but it still tastes good. Vivian accepted the broken cookie and bit into it. It was slightly burnt and very sweet and absolutely perfect. Thank you, Emma. This is exactly what I needed. They went inside together. Adrian made tea while Helen called her attorney to start divorce proceedings. Isabel began the process of formally removing their father from all board positions. And Vivian sat at the kitchen island, eating a broken cookie and watching snow start to fall outside. Her phone rang. Marcus, her assistant. "Vivian, I heard about the hearing. Everyone's talking about it." "I bet they are." "The Jakarta partners called. They got the full story about your father's sabotage. They're actually impressed you exposed it so thoroughly." "They're not worried anymore?" "Worried? They want to invest more. They said anyone who can handle that kind of family crisis while managing a major development is someone they want to work with long term." Vivian laughed, surprised. "That's not the reaction I expected." "Turns out competence speaks louder than family drama. Who knew?" Marcus paused. "There's something else. Your father's business partners are distancing themselves. 3 of them have already announced they're dissolving their agreements with Hale Properties. That was fast. Nobody wants to be associated with fraud charges. Richard Hale is toxic now." Vivian should have felt satisfaction at that. Instead, she just felt sad. Her father had built an empire over decades, and it was crumbling in hours. But he'd chosen that. Chosen control over trust, manipulation over honesty, power over love. She ended the call and found Adrian watching her. "Your Jakarta partners?" he asked. "They want to increase their investment. And you're not happy about it." "I am. She set down her phone. "I keep waiting to feel good about what happened today, but I don't. I just feel like I lost my father." "You did lose him," Adrian said gently. "The father you wanted him to be. The father he should have been. That's worth grieving. Even though he's still alive? Especially because he's still alive. Because you have to live with knowing he chose to be the person he is instead of the person you needed." Vivian looked out at the falling snow. "How long did it take you to stop being angry at Sarah's parents?" "I'll let you know when I get there." She smiled despite herself. "That's honest." "You want honesty?" "I'm still furious at them. For hurting Sarah, for trying to take Emma, for making an impossible situation worse. But I've learned to not let that fury control my life." He moved to stand beside her at the window. "You're allowed to be angry at your father. You're allowed to grieve the relationship you'll never have. And you're allowed to move forward anyway." "Is that what you did?" "I'm trying to. Some days are better than others." He glanced at her. "But I have help. Emma keeps me focused on what matters. And recently, I've had other reasons to think about the future instead of the past." There was something in his voice that made Vivian look at him directly. "What kind of reasons?" "The kind involving a stubborn billionaire who builds things and fights dragons and eats broken cookies with my daughter." Vivian's heart did something complicated. "Adrian, I'm not asking you for anything," he said quickly. "I know the timing is terrible. You just blew up your entire family. You have a business to run. The last thing you need is—" "What if it's exactly what I need?" He stopped. "What?" "What if—" Vivian paused, trying to find the right words. "For 30 years, I've been told I'm too much, too ambitious, too difficult, too unwilling to compromise. And then you showed up and looked at me like I was exactly right. Not too anything, just right." "You are right," Adrian said, "exactly as you are. I barely know you. You know I make weird-shaped pancakes. You know I help people fight their battles. You know I think you're worth standing up for." He smiled slightly. "What else do you need to know?" "Everything. I want to know everything." Vivian took his hand the same way she had last night. "But slowly, because I need time to figure out who I am without my father's shadow, without the comparison to Isabel, without all the weight I've been carrying." "I can do slow. Can you?" "Emma didn't walk until she was 16 months old. I'm very good at waiting for important things." From the living room came Emma's voice. "Daddy, Vivian, come see the snowman family I drew." They looked at each other and laughed. "She has excellent timing," Vivian said. "The absolute worst." They went to see Emma's drawing, a series of snow people in various sizes, all with carrot arms and big smiles. She'd labeled them carefully. Daddy, Emma, Vivian, Auntie Isabel, Grandma. "This is us," Emma announced. "We're a family now." That's not," Adrian started. "It is too. Families are people who stay even when things are hard. You said so. Vivian felt her throat tighten. That's a really good definition, Emma. I know. I'm very smart. Emma went back to her coloring, completely unself-conscious. Helen came into the room, phone in hand. The divorce attorney says we can move forward immediately. Apparently, Richard's legal troubles make it easier to argue for separation of assets. How do you feel about that? Isabel asked. Relieved, terrified, like I should have done it in 1995. Helen sat down heavily. I wasted so much time trying to make that man happy, trying to be the perfect wife, raise the perfect daughters, maintain the perfect image. We weren't perfect daughters, Vivian said. Thank goodness for that. Perfect would have been boring. Helen smiled sadly. I'm proud of you both, for fighting back, for refusing to accept his version of reality. Even though it destroyed the family? The family was already destroyed. You just stopped pretending it wasn't. Over the next few days, the full consequences of the hearings began to unfold. The district attorney filed formal charges against Richard for fraud and embezzlement. The foundation board initiated a complete restructuring. Richard's business partners continued to distance themselves, and several major clients terminated their contracts. Helen moved forward with divorce proceedings, hiring one of the most aggressive family law attorneys in the state. Isabel formally took over several of the family's legitimate business operations, the ones that hadn't been tainted by fraud. And Vivian returned to work, finding that her reputation had somehow improved rather than been damaged. The story had gotten out, not the scandalous parts about family dysfunction, but the professional parts about uncovering fraud and protecting her assets. Other developers started reaching out, wanting to work with someone who'd proven she could handle crisis with that much competence. The Jakarta project moved forward successfully. The township board approved additional variances. Her investors doubled down on their commitments. Everything was working out better than Vivian could have imagined, except she still felt hollow sometimes, still woke up expecting to see messages from her father that would never come, still caught herself wanting to call him and share good news, then remembering why that wasn't possible anymore. 3 weeks after the hearings, on a Sunday evening, Vivian sat in the Lake House Library with Adrian. Emma was asleep upstairs, having crashed after a full day of playing in the snow with Isabel. My father's attorney reached out, Vivian said. He wants to arrange a meeting, says my father wants to talk. Adrian looked up from his laptop. Do you want to talk to him? I don't know. Part of me wants to hear him admit what he did, wants him to apologize and mean it and somehow make it all make sense. She paused. But I know that's not going to happen. Probably not. So why do I still want it? Because he's your father. Because some part of you still hopes he can be different than he is. Adrian closed his laptop. When Sarah's parents tried to take Emma, I thought if I could just explain things clearly enough, they'd understand. They'd see that I was a good father, that I loved my daughter, that their anger was misdirected grief. Did they ever understand? No. They chose to believe I'd hurt Sarah. That was easier for them than accepting that sometimes terrible things just happen. He looked at Vivian. You can meet with your father if you need closure, but don't go expecting him to give you what he's never been capable of giving. Vivian thought about it for a long time. Then she picked up her phone and typed a message to her father's attorney. No meeting necessary. He knows what he did. So do I. There's nothing left to discuss. She hit send and felt something release in her chest. I don't need his apology, she said. I just needed to stop waiting for it. Adrian smiled. That's progress. Over dinner that night, Helen, Isabel, Adrian, Emma, and Vivian crowded around the kitchen table eating pasta Margaret had made. Vivian looked around and realized something. This was what family could be. Not perfect, not matching the picture in magazines, but real. People who showed up for each other. People who told the truth even when it was hard. People who stayed when things got difficult. Emma was telling a long, complicated story about her friend at school who claimed to have a pet dragon. Isabel was laughing. Helen was smiling more than Vivian had seen in years. Adrian was listening to his daughter with the kind of patience that came from genuine love. And Vivian was there, part of it, belonging without having to shrink herself or apologize or be anything other than exactly who she was. Her phone buzzed with a notification. The Jakarta development had just received its final permit approval. Construction could begin in the spring. She showed the message to the table. "Congratulations," Helen said. "You did it. Built something entirely your own." "Not entirely my own," Vivian corrected, looking at Adrian. "I had help." "You would have figured it out eventually. I just sped up the timeline." "Maybe, but I'm glad I didn't have to do it alone." Later, after Emma was in bed and the others had gone upstairs, Vivian and Adrian stood on the back deck looking at the frozen lake. The moon was full, painting everything silver. "I've been thinking about what happens next," Vivian said, "after all this settles down. What do you want to happen?" "I want to keep building. Not just buildings, but a life that's actually mine. I want to figure out who I am when I'm not trying to prove something to my father." She turned to face him. "And I want you in it. You and Emma. If that's something you want too." "It's something I want, but Vivian, you need to be sure. Because Emma gets attached. And if this doesn't work out, I'm sure. Not about everything. Not about how all the details will work or what the future looks like. But I'm sure about this. About you. About wanting to try." Adrian kissed her then, soft and careful, like she was something precious, like she was worth protecting. When they pulled apart, he was smiling. "Emma's going to be insufferable about this. She predicted it 2 weeks ago." "She did not." "She absolutely did. Drew a picture of us holding hands and everything. I told her she was getting ahead of herself." Apparently she wasn't. They went inside together as snow started falling again, covering the world in white, fresh and clean and full of possibility. The next morning, Vivian woke early and went for a walk on the lake. The ice was solid now, safe to walk on, and the air was so cold it hurt to breathe. She thought about everything that had happened in the last month. The discovery of her father's betrayal, the hearings, the confrontations, the decisions that had broken her family apart and rebuilt it into something new. She thought about the girl she'd been at this same lake house years ago, desperate for her father's approval, willing to make herself smaller to fit his expectations. And she thought about the woman she was now, scared sometimes, uncertain often, but finally free. Her phone rang. "Isabel." "Where are you? Margaret's making waffles." "On the lake, walking." "In this cold, you're insane." "Probably. I'll be back soon." She hung up and stood in the middle of the frozen lake, looking back at the house. Smoke rose from the chimney. Lights were on in the kitchen. Through the windows, she could see movement. Her mother, probably. Or maybe Adrian making coffee. Home, Vivian thought. Not the house itself, which still belonged to her father legally, even if her mother was fighting for it in the divorce. But the people inside it, the connections she'd built, the family she'd chosen. That was home. She walked back toward the house, toward waffles and coffee and Emma's chatter and Adrian's steady presence, toward a future she was building herself, piece by piece, without permission or approval from anyone who'd ever tried to make her small. The ice beneath her feet was solid. The path ahead was clear. And for the first time in 30 years, Vivian Hale was exactly where she was supposed to be. Not because someone else had decided it for her, but because she had chosen it herself. And that, she realized as she stepped off the ice and onto the snowy shore, made all the difference.